Detroit rapper Eminem is back with a surprise new album called Kamikaze. It's a follow-up to his kind of failed album Revival, which, as the name implied, was trying to kind of revive him and make him stay relevant after the album before that, which was the Marshall Mathers LP2, which was also a failure in a lot of ways, especially carrying that name and just failing to live up to the expectations there. And he's dropped this as a kind of a rebuttal and as a counter to the negative criticism that he has gotten over those past albums, particularly with Revival, which was torn apart by critics and fans alike. It really saw very, very poor ratings and reception, and this is kind of his response to that, and it's his way to kind of say, hey, I'm still here, I'm still relevant, and to kind of express his anger with that and kind of his frustrations with the industry as it is today. New rappers, he covers a lot of topics on here, goes after a lot of people, and it's a kind of Eminem on the defensive, but also on the attack as well. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. The album kicks off with a track called The Ringer, which really just pulls no punches. He goes after the critics, the fans, and everybody, the newer rappers out there, calling out people by name, and it's kind of Eminem really at his best, the anger, the frustration, and if that's what it takes to get him to this point, then yeah, no, I hate to say it, but maybe he needs a little bit more of that. I mean, everything on the track really just kind of emphasizes what he does and what he does well, and unfortunately kind of brings a little bit of the problematic nature of him as well, and it's demonstrated right off the bat with his repeated use of the R word, and it's kind of something that's frustrated. I'll get to that a little bit later as far as why that kind of bothers me and on a lot of levels. But moving on, the album kind of continues with a track called Greatest, which is him kind of expressing that he feels like he's earned his spot on the spot at the table as being one of the greatest rappers of all time. It's definitely feels like it's a verbal assault, but it's got a hook to it. It's one of the tracks on here that could probably be more radio friendly, I guess, although it's not very friendly in a lot of ways, but it's one of the more catchier tracks on here. He kind of gets that going, and that's kind of the theme throughout this album. Is there's less poppy tracks on here. There were enough of those on Marshall Mathers LP and as well as on a Revival. There were kind of too many of them where it felt like he was trying to write tracks that would get him back his radio success, and I don't really think that's where he succeeds very well. I think his tracks that made it onto the radio were some of the weakest tracks that he has ever put out, and it's unfortunate. I mean, even the more popular ones like Stand or Cleaning Out My Closet, for instance, I think those are really not great tracks, especially in comparison to the rest of the tracks on those albums that he put out. And that's kind of the thing here. I think he kind of ignores some of that and kind of is trying to just put his feelings and anger out onto the paper, and it comes out in a fantastic way here. I think it really is kind of him doing what he does best, and being at his best, but again, unfortunately, it brings out the more negative aspects of him, which we kind of hear on the track called Normal, which brings into a lot of the misogyny that has permeated his lyrics throughout the years. It's kind of a track that's him talking about the women he's dated, and it's really talking about an abusive relationship coming from both ends, but it feels like it's focused on the woman in the story of this, and it's kind of something that really kind of irks me and bothers me a lot listening to it, because it feels unnecessary. It feels like there was no reason to write a track like that. It almost feels like he's trying to come off as being a joking about it, which it doesn't feel like something that doesn't come off as funny. It's more cringy than anything. It doesn't. It doesn't really work here. And I talked about the fact that these feel like less poppy albums. There are a few tracks on here. For instance, Stepping Stone is a track that really kind of feels like a ballady track, a little bit of a mournful track, and it's something, again, I probably could see here or hear on the radio, but overall it's less poppy than he's done in the past. But you know, it's one of the songs that really doesn't connect for me. I don't like that style that he has when he does that. But you know, it's something, if you do like those tracks, I think it is well done. I think you probably will gravitate towards it and definitely kind of see it for what it is, and probably would like that track. When I talk about the problematic nature of Eminem, it's completely demonstrated in the two tracks, Good Guy and Nice Guy, which are basically from his perspective talking about him being a good guy, or you know, what he perceives as being a decent guy trying and being mistreated by women, and you know, basically all the garbage you hear from MRAs on Reddit. But it almost, again, feels like a self-aware parody, but at the same time, I can't really tell if it is, or especially based off his, I mean, I'm more willing to say it's not based off of other tracks on here, as well as other tracks that he has put out. It really feels like this is something he's doing, unfortunately, in earnest, but it kind of comes off as that way where it could have almost been a self-aware parody. But again, it just doesn't connect. It doesn't feel right. It feels cringy. It feels like there was no reason to for him to have written these lyrics or written these tracks, especially now you're talking about a dude in what, his 40s. It feels childish. It feels immature, but not in a lighthearted, goofy way, just kind of in a generally mean way. So it's kind of unfortunate to hear those songs on here. The album definitely could have done without them. And the other thing is, throughout this album, there are unfortunately a lot of homophobic slurs as well as ableist slurs on here. Like I said, you mentioned it right off the bat, starting with the R word repeatedly. There's a reason it bothers me a lot. I mean, people like to say, you know, oh, why are you so offended? You know, it's just a word, blah, blah, blah. But it really, you know, especially the homophobic slurs, when you hear somebody like Eminem, a popular artist, using them, it kind of normalizes them. And I mean, there was just recently in the news, which unfortunately isn't all that uncommon, a young kid killing himself because he was bullied by his classmates for becoming out as gay. And you know, even the response to that online from adults was just absolutely disheartening to hear, you know, some of the responses that it was getting. And a lot of it has to do with the permeation of homophobia in modern culture and in the media. And it's things like this that kind of perpetuate it. And also, just on another level, it's not a necessary thing. He didn't need to use it. There was no reason to have those references and slurs in here. You know, he is a great lyricist, so it's kind of sad to have him just rely on those. And it feels like he's kind of just, whenever he does that, it just really feels cheap and like an easy out, instead of thinking of another word to kind of express his feelings with that. And you know, a lot of people will say that it's what Eminem does. If you're shocked by this, then, you know, he's done his job, or that's just how he is. You shouldn't expect it. And I understand that, and that is always how he's been. But this kind of boys will be boys nature towards things like this is kind of why it keeps going. And I really think that it is something that, regardless of how you feel about the talent and the everything else behind this album, it's something that is kind of important to call out and to address, because it's unnecessary and it does cause harm. And it's really unfortunate to hear that, and especially what I would probably consider one of his best albums in really the last, like, almost the last decade. It's been a while since we've gotten a decent album from him, and you know, here we are, and it's unfortunate to still hear those slurs being thrown around. And you know, especially in light of things like that happening, I think that it's more than just, it is, you know, it is what it is, or that's just the way he is. You can be shocking and edgy and everything like that without being just completely offensive to people who are already marginalized and already being attacked. And that's the whole reason we should be bothered. We should be offended by things like that, and we should be calling it out. Again, regardless of how you feel about the music and the everything else behind it, that should be enough to kind of stop and say, you know, maybe he doesn't deserve the support, and that maybe it's time to kind of just move away from that. And I know it's something also that does, it is common throughout the whole hip hop and rap industry. It's unfortunately something that needs to be addressed. And I mean, it starts with critics. You know, I know I'm just a small channel, and I know a lot of people are probably going to dismiss this and just probably hate on this, what I'm saying, but it starts with critics. It starts with people. It starts with fans holding artists accountable for it. It starts with critics holding artists accountable and saying, hey, you have so much talent behind you, and why are you choosing to go this route? And why are you choosing to use these words and these phrases and these you know, analogies that are harmful to people? And there's so much more to draw from. I mean, the English language is huge. There's so many other words and phrases and things that you could draw from. And why would you choose to limit yourself like this? And it's just, especially knowing that it can cause harm to people. So I really think that's something that needs to be addressed, and really kind of unfortunately bothers me about this album. But it's kind of a mix, because I want to say that overall, I enjoyed this album. I think that it is Eminem at his best. I think that there's fantastic songs on here, like Fall, for instance, which is kind of goofy and lighthearted, and I think it's kind of him reverting back to his earlier days. I think that he did a good job on that. The song Not Alike is him talking about how different he is from the other rappers out today, and all this, you know, SoundCloud rappers and these trap beats and things. And it almost feels like, it's weird because it almost feels like he's embracing these trends, but also at the same time dismissing them as being less and something he would never do, and that he's better than this. And it's kind of all over the place in that, where it feels like he's desperately clinging on to trying to be relevant, but I think he makes a case for himself in here as far as the amount of talent that's on display. His lyricism, again, is at a high point here. His flow is fantastic throughout. I mean, there's these moments where he goes hard and just spits out words like a machine gun. And then there's moments where he kind of does that sing-songy thing that he does. He kind of has an interesting control over his voice and his lyrics. But again, it's those little elements that kind of bring it down, and you know, it just feels so unnecessary, and it does kind of feel like a bit cringy to actually hear words like that and lyrics like that still in today. You know, so I think it's something that needs to be addressed. As far as what your enjoyment will be, again, if it's something that you get past and you aren't really offended by, or something that doesn't really bother you, if you're a fan of Eminem, I think you'll like this album. It's definitely miles ahead of Revival. He kept it short, which was smart as well. There's only not that many tracks on here, and each of those tracks are pretty short, and 2 of them are skits. You know, but if you really kind of are a bit conscious about things, and if that stuff does kind of bother you, then I think it's enough to, even though it's really not a lot in here, but it's enough, I think, to the point where it may dampen your enjoyment of this. And just, you know, again, that's a lot of people, people don't like Eminem, is because of his use of those slurs. But it's kind of those things where it's going to be a personal issue. If it's something you want to get past, then you probably will enjoy it. If not, then you don't even bother listening to this album, just overall. Thank you so much for watching the review of Eminem's Kamikaze, the surprise 2018 album. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. If you want to follow me on social media to keep up to date, I'm on Twitter at Metalloud, on Facebook with facebook.com/Metalloud, Instagram Metal_Loud, as well as I do have a Patreon you can donate if you want to keep seeing content like this. It's Patreon/Metalloud. Appreciate the support, and I will see you all next time.